Okay, we continue. So we saw the path of Boga. We saw the actions when they are based on the kleshas, when they are based on our wrong knowledge, our identification with the mind and the body, when they are based on our desire for pleasure and aversion from suffering, and when they are based on fear. Eventually we go deeper towards samsara. One important thing to know is that the yoga doesn't say you have to stop to enjoy life, or you have to avoid going to seminars or doing things like this, or creating relationship and working, getting money, all of these things, or take care of your body. It says do all of it, but just know that it will not lead you to freedom. If you want freedom, then you need to take another course. But then you can do all of these actions and just be wise, be aware when you do them, and you will see the suffering that comes out of it. For example, if I am very concerned with my body, I will see the suffering with how my body looks. I will see the suffering that comes with old age, because with the transformation of the body. Or when I am very much attached to some one feeling, for example, the feeling of peace of mind, then I will see the suffering comes when, I don't know, something will change and I will not have my peace of mind anymore. Or if I am very much attached to material things, then I will see the suffering that comes, or the actions that are needed to be done when they break, or that they have to be maintained. So it's not to stop to be active in the world. You can continue to be active in the world. You can do all these things, but just see the suffering that comes, or see that the lack of freedom that is there. That all things in Prakriti, because they are temporary, because they are changing, they have to be maintained all the time. They have to be all the time sustained, and there will not be any calmness there, or quietness there, or stability there. So just know that, and continue to be active in the world. It's okay. But then, if you want also freedom, then look for it where it is, and it is nowhere to be found inside Prakriti. The freedom is not there, because we said the freedom is our purity, it is our pure self. Then we have to do the process to go there. It's like we are wrapped in all these, how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers that are wrapping us. And now, like a process of purification, we want to discover who we are. So it's like we have to peel different things away to realize that they are different than us, and then to realize who we are, to realize our freedom. In the process, in the example that I gave before with the gold, imagine a person now has to purify gold. What does he need to know? What does he need to be able to do? So, first I need to know what is gold and what is different than gold. If I want to purify gold, imagine that I think that the gold is not the gold. Then I will not be able to purify gold. So I have to have the ability to distinguish between two things. What is, to see that two things are different from each other, and then I need to choose what is the thing that I want. Then if I want the gold, I need to be able to put aside everything that is not the gold. But if I am not able to distinguish, or I am not able to put aside, then I will never be able to purify the gold. And I need to know what the gold is. I need to be able to recognize this. So imagine us now, we are in this human form, in this human body, and we are looking for something that we don't even know what it looks like or what it is. So First, we have to develop the ability to distinguish between two different things. Between what? Between one thing that is changing all the time and between one thing that is always there. First, this is what we have to do. So we have to develop the ability to distinguish. This is a mental faculty, a mental ability. So we have to have the ability to distinguish between two things, and this ability has to be developed. As a simple example, a musician, one that has been dealing a lot with music, has the ability to distinguish between notes or between instruments. If he hears some kind of, a symphony, he can tell, oh, this is the, violin, this is the, I don't know what is there. Yeah, the different instruments. Yes, my understanding in music. But, for example, me, that I have about zero understanding in music, if I hear a symphony, everything sounds like one big thing, and I cannot distinguish which instrument is playing, or what is he playing, or if he did a mistake or not, or if he's in tune or not. So, this ability to distinguish for the musician is something that developed because he was a lot of time dealing with music, listening, exploring, playing. He's been involved in that, so he developed the ability to distinguish in this field. So, in our journey, we will have to develop the ability to distinguish, but not between notes or colors or things like this, but between two very interesting things, between the unchanging Purusha and the changing Prakriti. So we will have to deal there. We will have to be involved there, to investigate there. We will have to spend some time there. This time spent there is spent in a technique we call meditation. This is the time when we start to look at what is the mind, what is the matter, what is the consciousness. We start to be familiar with this inner world, with our own system, and the two elements that compose this system. And the more we spend time there, the more we will be able to start to distinguish, to recognize that there are actually two things there. One that is changing and one that is not changing. In the beginning, it might look difficult. Like for me, if I now start to study music and I start to listen to a symphony, it will seem impossible to even see that there are different instruments there. But the more I will do it, the easier it will become and the better I will become in it. So the same with this technique of meditation that we are going to practice later on during the day. In the beginning it can seem impossible to even see something there. It's like a forest of, thoughts and ideas and emotions and movements. And then slowly, with the practice, we start to develop the ability to see better, to distinguish better, and then we start to realize, okay, there are two things there. And then we can start to start to do the separation. We will have to see all of this. We will have to see that we are different, or that there is something that is different than the matter, than the body. We will have to see that there is something that is different than the functions of the senses. We will have to see there is something that is different from the action, the function of the mind, from the thoughts and the emotions and the ideas and the memories and all of this mind stuff. We will have to see that there is something different than our identifications. We will have to be able to see that, and eventually we will even have to be able to see that there is something different than the conscious element, that the feeling of I, that even this is like a cover, that even this is, even here, there is no true freedom, there is not completely pure. But this is already very, very subtle. It's like only a very well-trained musician can maybe see or note very subtle things in the music. So the same here, only a very trained yogi or mind well trained in meditation will allow us to see the difference between the buddhi, this aware element, this conscious element, and the purusha, the really unchanging thing. But this we will see later. Any questions before I continue? Okay. So remember that we said that these two paths of Bhoga and Apavarga, they are like in any given moment in our life, we can do this choice. So how does it look when we choose to go to the Bhoga? We will see that our choice is according to the kleshas, according to what we feel. That when I choose an action, because in every moment in the life we have to choose an action, then I will see that when I go towards the Bhoga, the action was chosen according to this, basically according to the desire for pleasure or the aversion from suffering. And you will see it, you can see it when you eat, for example, and you choose to maybe take another plate. Maybe you're not hungry anymore, but it's only the desire for more pleasure, for another piece of pie. So you can see in that moment that you choose it, you know that you go towards the Bhoga, towards more identification with this human system, more involvement in the samsara, in the cycle of birth and death. And it's okay, it's not a problem, only we can start to notice it in our life, these moments where we choose the action, to see according to what we chose, first of all. And then to see, yes, many times we choose according to have more pleasure or to avoid the suffering, or we act out of fear, and you will see it, and you will see how it leads you toward the samsara. But in this junction, if I want to be able to choose differently, to choose another action, the root of this action is actually here in the knowledge, because this whole model of kleshas, it's like one developed out of the other. It is because I don't distinguish, or I don't distinguish between me and the mind and the body, that I identify myself with the body, and then I always look for pleasure, look to avoid suffering, then I fear, and then these actions based on this. So if I want to change the action, I want to be able to choose the path of Apavarga, I have to change the action. And in order to change this action, actually what is needed to change is here. The knowledge that we have about who we are, and about the difference between us and the body and the mind. And the more we change this knowledge, the more we will see we are able to act differently. And how will it look? For example, I can see that I want more pleasure in the form of another piece of pie, but I will be aware, I will also be able to see that I am full. And then in that moment, instead of letting this, I like to call it automatic action, because this is, as we said, the Bhoga is not, the process of Bhoga is not something that is aware. It happens naturally, so it's automatic. So instead of going to this automatic action, I can choose an aware action. I can choose an action different, for example, not to take another piece of pie. But not to take another piece of pie, is it easy? No? Not so much. It needs some effort. It needs it's special intention there and effort. Just like we said, the process of Apavarga, this road, it needs intention and it needs effort. It will not happen by itself like the process of the Bhoga. And then in that moment, I choose to act differently if I find it necessary. And in that moment, I'm going towards making the conscious element inside of me stronger. or making myself more aware. And why? Because of a very simple fact. If you remember, we said, remember this ahankara, this identification with our actions? The more we act according to the desires and aversions of the mind, what are we going to be identified with? The mind. Okay? If the mind decides for me what I eat and what I don't eat, then the mind, I become more and more identified with the mind, because this is the actions that I am doing. But if what is starting to direct my actions is not what I feel, or the cravings I have, or the aversions I have, but some conscious element, some awareness is there that directs my actions, what identity am I going to develop? Identity of awareness. I'm going to identify myself more with the conscious part of the system, and less with the mind, or this mind and body parts. Do you understand the idea? Because our identifications are the result of our actions. And we can see it, for example, in periods in your life that you didn't so well manage your life. You didn't eat well, and you didn't do your practice, and you just sat in front of the TV all day and, ate potato chips. How did you feel? Horrible. And if you were asked at that moment, who is in control? What would you were asked, who is in control? What would you say?
The chips control.
Yeah, exactly. That you are not in control. It is, these periods that we feel like we are drowning, that we lose control of our life. You know it? What is taking control is the mind. We go through these episodes that we see that it's the desires. They take control of us, and they start to direct our actions. And when they direct our actions, we go more into the suffering, more into the samsara, and we will say it with our words. We will say we lost control of our life, right? This feeling. But then, if let's say you went through this difficult period, and then at some point, the suffering will grow and grow, and maybe there will come a point that you will say, enough. I must change something, otherwise I'm going to drown, I'm going to die here. And then what is the change that you are doing? Can you remember these periods in your life? What did you do different? You started to take responsibility over your actions. You started to choose them in more conscious way, more aware way, to make them not according to your cravings or desires, but according to what you find useful for your life. And then you start to choose what to eat. You start to choose to do the practice. You choose to go to nature and not only sit in front of the TV. There is some conscious element taking control. And then if somebody asks you who is in control, what will you say? You say, I'm back in control. I'm back on the horse. Can you relate to this thing? So this is exactly what happens. When we start to act more aware in life, more conscious actions, then immediately we become closer to our true nature, to this conscious element. So we must change our actions on the path of apavarga. This is the main thing that is going to change. We must be able to start to choose our actions differently. And the more we act from a conscious place, this element is going to grow. Why do we need to grow this element in us? Like the story of the gold, if we want to separate between two things, both of them have to be vivid. Both of them have to, we have to be able to see both of them, to say one is different than the other. If I only see one thing, can I say one is different than the other? No. Okay? So I must have some other element there that is different than the mind, that is different than the body, that I will be able to say it is different. I must have some conscious element, something else working there. And then I will be able to divide and say, this belongs to the changing nature, this belongs to the constant and stable nature. But if there is no two things in front of me, how can I divide? How can I say this is one thing and this is the other? So the more we act in a aware way, and in a moment where we are going to see all the techniques, the more we develop this conscious element, the more we will able to see the difference between what is our city and who we are, and we will be able to do this process of purification. Any questions? So this point that we said, and one just I said it, but important thing to know: the turning point between the boga and the apavarga is the suffering. In yoga, the suffering is one of the best things we have received in this life, because it is when we suffer that we start to make a change. As long as we don't suffer, we are quite happy with what there is already. But then the suffering makes us change something, and the suffering can appear in many different ways. It can appear as a disease, and then we start to suffer, and then we say, okay, we have to change something, we have to start to eat better, we have to start to exercise better, we have to do something different. It can be the mind, things of the mind, this overstress or depression, anxiety, fear, all these things that we say, okay, something has to be changed. For example, today in the West, for me, fear is the biggest problem. Anxiety is the biggest disease of the West, because we have become so identified with our body and mind. We became so much individuals that we are in constant fear of what is going to happen, or that suffering is going to come and we're going to lose our pleasure. So the more we fear, eventually we will say something has to be changed. We cannot continue living like this. And then when we reach this point of too much suffering, we cannot handle it anymore, then we will start to look for a solution. And usually life will bring us some hint, some way, some direction. It will be a book or a yoga seminar or some lecture I heard or some talk with a friend. There will be, or some post about something, it will be something that will lead me to tell me, okay, there is another solution, there is another way. And if we are lucky, we will be introduced to the way of apavarga, the way to the complete way towards freedom. So next time when you suffer, don't be so upset. You can suffer, but remember that this can only be something that you can use to give yourself more motivation to go towards freedom. And also when you see another person suffers, I always say each person is entitled to his amount of suffering in this life. We don't necessarily have to take suffering away from people. We can give them some advices of, where to go or what to do, but to try to take the suffering away, it's like to maybe try to prevent them from reaching the stage where they say, enough, I must take responsibility, I must change something. So even if you see other people suffering, understand this is part of their journey. From this suffering, they have the choice, the two paths. Either they continue in the boga towards more suffering, or they decide this is enough suffering, I'm going to look for another way. And you can see these people, for example, these wonderful stories always come. For example, people with cancer, they got cancer. For one person, it was the path towards more suffering. But for another person, it was the wake-up call. Do you know these people? And from that moment, they decided they have to take control of their life. They have to start to change their nutrition, to change their actions, and they started to do the path towards awareness. And these people afterwards, if you ask them about the cancer, they will say that cancer was my presence in this life. It was what made me alive again. It brought me back to life. It was not my death call. It was actually the present given to me. And like this, many stories of people with big suffering, they took it to as a motivation to kaivalya, and they have transformed their life and they have reached freedom much more than they had before. So, we are here in the choice, and we said we need to change our actions and we have to develop the ability to distinguish. I don't know how to write it. I write it like this. We need the ability to distinguish between two different things. We will need to develop this ability. This ability in Sanskrit is called viveka, the ability to distinguish. I'll put it here. Viveka, this is the ability to look at things and to say one is different than the other. And what we will want is the knowledge that comes from the ability to distinguish. The knowledge that says, I am this unchanging Purusha, unchanging conscious element, and this mind and body is my vehicle, are my vehicle, but they are not me. They are different than me in character. They are different in, they are here to serve me, but they are not me. This is the knowledge that we want to receive from our ability to distinguish. This knowledge is called viveka kiyati. The knowledge that comes from the ability to distinguish. And in the Yoga Sutra, one of the ancient texts of yoga, Patanjali says, if you have this knowledge that comes from this, the ability to distinguish, if you have the knowledge about the difference between Purusha and Prakriti, then you have reached the end of knowledge. There is no more things you need to know. You have completed the way of the knowledge. You have completed the way to freedom. There is not more that you will need to know in order to reach the freedom. There is, of course, many things still to know in Prakriti. Because Prakriti, there are many things. For example, I can investigate insects and the weather and the earth and many things there still to study. But if I want to do the journey of self-realization, if I want to do the journey towards kaivalya, towards freedom, only one type of knowledge is needed. The difference, to know the difference between me and Prakriti. And if we have gained this knowledge, we have come to the end of the practice. We have come to the end of the way. I like it very much because many times we think there is no end to knowledge. But in yoga there is completely end. There is completely what we have for this process, what we needed to know. And if we know it, the process is complete. There is no more things needed. And many times I know in life or in yoga in general, or in life in general and in yoga, we think that it's a never-ending road and that there is always something more to learn. But there is only more learn in Prakriti. For this path of freedom, there is an end. And when you realize who you are, and if you have done this process of purification, and you understood your nature and you have reached freedom, this freedom is, you will also realize, it cannot be taken away from you. It cannot be something you can lose. It is not something you have to gain. Why? Why this freedom is not something we can lose, and it is not something that we need to gain?
Because it is all the time within or in you.
Okay. First of all, it is us. And second of all, what is the characteristics? It is unchanging.
Constant.
It is constant. So, something constant cannot be lost and cannot be gained. It is all the time there, the same, unchanging. Only we had to discover it. Because we have become covered with all these layers. And then we peel, but the moment we realize this element and we realize it is always there, it can be covered again, and we don't lose it. Simple example, we know that the sun is there. Yeah? All of us know that during the day the sun is there. Or even in the night, we know that the sun is still there, yeah, just somewhere else, just not visible, maybe. When the sun is covered by clouds, do we think that we lost the sun? No. Okay? We know that it is there exactly the same, only that now it cannot be seen because it is covered by clouds. But we don't panic and start searching for the sun, like crazy people, because it is now covered. But to know that, before we had to know again and again that the sun is there. We had to see it again and again. And then we had the realization the sun will always be there. Even if there is clouds or not, it is still there. And it didn't change. It is only the cloud that changed. The cloud came and gone, but the sun was there. So the same will be our understanding with our freedom. It is always there. This conscious element, this pure us, is always there. Only that sometimes it is covered. What is it covered with? It is covered with our identification. It is covered with our thoughts and feelings. It is covered with our desires. It is covered by many things. In the beginning, to realize it, we had to do a process of uncovering that soon we are going to see how we are going to make it. How to realize that this place is there, that this thing is there. But after we have done it, we don't need to do the process of uncovering again, because we already know it is always there. So then in our life, it will be just like regular life. We will not, but very different, because everything will be possible. Everything will be able to be there or can appear. Identifications can be there, because if I know my true freedom and I know that it is unchanging, are identifications a prison now? Like the clouds, do they change the sun? No. Okay, so I will be able to have all my identifications as usual, but I will know that they did not in any moment transform or change my freedom. They only appear and disappear, the identification. But my freedom, this conscious element, this Purusha, is there anyway. And then the same with the mind. The mind will be able to act as it wishes. I will be able to have all emotions, all thoughts, all ideas. I will be able to sometimes be calm and sometimes be angry, sometimes be disturbed and sometimes be in peace. I will be able to experience all of this, knowing that my true nature is not changed because of this. But today it's not like this. Today we think that we need to have some certain state of mind in order to be in freedom, in order to be, to be free. But when we understand our true freedom, when we understand it is always there, then finally the mind can do whatever it wants. We stop bothering about it. And then even if we are angry, it's okay. And if we are sad, it's okay. And if we are depressed, it's okay. It's not going to be something that is going to compromise our freedom. Do you understand? This is true freedom. Not the freedom that we try to achieve by controlling the mind into one state and trying to hold it, and again we failed. But the true freedom is to let this mind and body behave like a mind and body, change all the time, knowing that the true freedom is not disturbed, not compromised by anything that happened in the temporary and changing world. And then you will see something very deep changing in your life. Because if we go back to the kleshas, to our actions, if today our actions are always based in trying to achieve some pleasant state of mind, and because of this we are acting, because of this influences the way we talk to other people, it influences which projects we do. If it's difficult, we stop. It influences many things because we all the time try to achieve some state of mind. When we are no longer involved, or we no longer care what state of mind we have, then we can do everything. We can do a project even if it is boring and difficult. We can be in relationship even though there are some difficult periods there. We can be, with self-criticism, even though it's unpleasant. We can finally be in this mind and body. We can finally let them be as they are, knowing that they don't influence our freedom, but still our actions will be different. They will not, our actions will be different. There will not be actions to continue to sustain one state of mind, but there will be actions that will be useful for the situation, and this we are going to see later after we first have to discover our freedom. But do you understand the difference? That how today we are so much bothered with how we feel and what we think, and all our actions are meant to change there something and to feel freedom here. But the moment we realize where the freedom really is, and that it is, we cannot lose it, and we don't need to gain it again and again, then we are free of messing with this, and we can finally act differently in the world. Any questions? So, we are again in the crossroad here. We have suffered enough. We started to take the path towards Kaivalya, and we need to change the actions, and we need to develop the ability to distinguish, or to develop what we call viveka, and the knowledge that comes from viveka, that is called viveka kyati. In order to develop the ability to see, to distinguish, we need to go through a process of training the mind. Because our mind is our instrument through which we experience the world or perceive the world. It is our instrument through which we think about things, and it is our instrument through which we decide action. The mind has to be in good condition, and we have to know how to use it if we want to develop the ability of viveka, to distinguish, and the ability to act in a aware way. So the whole beginning of the process of yoga or the process of apavarga is actually mind training. This is what it is, and it has different steps. Now we can start by asking how is our mind today? What is the condition of this instrument? How well have we developed it, or that it? Do we know how to use it to distinguish between two very subtle things? What do you think? What is the state of our mind in the daily life? Depends. Depends. Yeah, mostly it is very much occupied with other things. For example, we can see it, a very simple example. We can be in a wonderful place in nature, but do we necessarily see what is around us? You know this thing that you are in a wonderful place, but the only thing you see is what is in your mind, your thoughts and your ideas and your feelings, and I don't know, making plans for tomorrow or all of these things. in this state of mind, when the mind doesn't show me what there is, but only show me what is inside it, what it is already full with, this is not a state of mind that is ready for investigation. For investigation, to be able to distinguish between two things, I have to do this process of investigation. The mind has to be like a crystal. It has to be like the yoga likes to say like a crystal, or like a calm and clear lake that will show me what there is when I look through it. But mostly today our mind is not in a state that it can show us, because it is either very much disturbed with other thoughts. For example, even now, sitting in a lecture, maybe you can see sometimes that you have stopped listening, because, I don't know, you went to think about somebody you're worried about, or something else that is happening, and you lose contact with what is being said. So, many times our mind is like this, occupied with different things, or maybe we have difficulty to concentrate for a long time. And then we will see our attention all the time disturbed, going to other places. For example, we see it sometimes when we try to read a book, and then there are noises or things like this around, and all the time the attention goes away, and all the time we come back and we read the same line again and again, and we don't even know what we are reading, because the attention always goes away, and we are just on the surface of this line, we cannot continue, and we can not even understand what we are reading. So many times, the attention, we cannot hold attention, we cannot concentrate for a long time, or the mind is very disturbed, or another thing that can be is that the mind is very tired. Do you know it? This state that you start to read a book and you fall asleep immediately. Yeah, it's like that. Or you try to sit to meditation, and it's only 5 minutes meditation, but you fell asleep after like 13 seconds, and you wake up with the gong. So many times the mind is like this. It can also be tired. And then when the mind is in this way, there is not even a point to start to investigate or start to see something that is subtle, or subtle difference between things. So we first have to train the mind. A little bit yoga concepts, if you're interested. When we talk about the state of mind, we can say when the mind is under a lot of movement, either it is very occupied with a lot of thoughts, or there is a lot of movement of the attention, we can call it Rajasic mind. Rajas is the force of life that is responsible for movement. And then when it is dominant in the mind, it creates a lot of movement in the mind. If we take example, it will be like a lake with waves. And then if we think of this lake with a lot of waves, the movement, and we want to look to see the bottom of the lake, we will see that we cannot see the bottom of the lake. What do we see instead? The waves. Okay? Very clearly. We can see only the wave. We cannot see that there is another thing under. So this is when our mind is very occupied. We can see only the thoughts, only the feelings, the ideas that we have. We cannot see anything else. Even we can be in very wonderful places. So sometimes we have the mind after the influence of Rajas. In the West, this is mostly the state of mind. This is also the reason why people cannot fall asleep at night. Maybe you know it. That you want to go to sleep, but this is not sleeping. This is moving all the time. And as long as there is movement there, it is impossible to fall asleep. So, and this movement is only a result of the actions that we have done during the day. You can see it also in your life. In periods that you have lots of problems or you have big projects, you will see the mind more occupied with a lot of movement, and you will see that it is more difficult to fall asleep, for example, or more difficult to concentrate. So it is only a result of our actions, and sometimes the mind is under this influence. And when the mind is like this, there is no point to try even to investigate into something subtle. Sometimes the mind is under the influence of what we call Tamas. Tamas is the force of nature that is responsible of maintaining the things together or holding things together. It is like a heavy force, binding things together. When the mind is under the influence of Tamas, the mind is very dull, it's very heavy. Maybe you know it after a night of drinking, how your mind is in the morning. It's like there's nobody to talk to. You know, it's like heavy and sluggish, and even people say good morning to you, you hardly understand what they say and why they bother you. So many times the mind is like this, maybe after also a heavy meal. You know, try to study after a heavy meal. This is why we don't have lunch, because otherwise all of you will fall asleep in the next lecture. So this heavy mind also is not a mind in which we should try to investigate. If we say the Rajasic mind is something we find a lot in the West, all this movement and this bothering thoughts, the Tamasic mind, we also see it many times in the form of depression. And you will see that one of the characteristics of depression is when the people try to describe their life, they will say only one thing. They will say everything is shit, or they will say everything is there is no point in nothing. They will see everything very dark, very black. But it's not that everything is very dark and very black. What is dark and black is the mind, and it shows them everything to be the same. It's like in the example of the lake. Now there is no maybe waves in the lake, but there is a lot of mud in the water. And so when you try to look to see the bottom, you don't see the bottom, you see the mud in the water. You see what is inside the water. And maybe you think you see the bottom, but it's not the bottom. It's only what is inside the water. So the mind in this state of tamas will not show us the reality at all. It will only show us something very dark, very heavy of reality, and then no point in trying to investigate when the mind is like this. If we want to investigate, we need a mind under the influence of Sattva. Sattva is the force that allows things to be as they are. It is the pure form of everything. So everything has its sattvic state. Like everything can have a tamasic state and a rajasic state. And when the mind is sattvic, it is like this pure lake, pure and still lake, no movement, and the water is crystal clear. Or yoga also likes to give the example of a crystal, a stone, a crystal, completely clear. And then everything that I put the crystal on, I will see it exactly as it is. There will not be any distortion. I will see exactly the thing as it is. This is the state of mind that we need. Unfortunately, this state of mind is not very common. This state of mind has to be developed intentionally. Otherwise, we will not have it. And it is very simple to understand why. Another example I can give for the mind, we can think of the mind like a camera. We have a camera here, so we can think of it. The camera is supposed to show us reality as it is. But if the camera is moving, it is like the rajas. Or if the lens is dirty, is covered with dust, like the tamas, instead of showing me reality as it is, it will show me some picture that is very different than what there is. But if I want the camera to be steady and I want the lens to be clear, I have to do some special actions. Because if I let the lens alone, it is going to be slowly covered with dust. It is not going to be cleaned by itself. This is why in the beginning, when we want to take photo, we clean the lens. And the camera is not going to be stable by itself. I have to put it in a stable place or hold my hand steady. So to stabilize something and to keep something clean or clear, I have to do some special actions. And we can see so nicely how the mind naturally becomes with more movement, or naturally becomes more tamasic, more heavy. But to make it clear and steady, we have to do some special actions. These special actions are the yoga practice, the yoga techniques. All of them, in the beginning, their purpose is to stabilize the mind and to make the mind more clear and make it ready for investigation. And the yoga techniques, they can be many. The yoga techniques are many, and they develop from the more gross to the more subtle. And all of them are directed to develop sattva, to prepare the mind for the investigation, to be able to distinguish between these two things that we need. First, the first technique that the yoga offers is what is called Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga is all the practices that we do with the body, the movements, and that we do with the breath. And why do we work with the body and the breath to begin with? Because it is through doing actions or movements with the mind and the breath that we can steady the mind. If we try to work directly with the mind when it is very tired or when it is under a lot of movement, we will not be able to do it. But to move the body and to breathe is much easier. It's more accessible. And then you can see, for example, probably you have experienced it, how you come into a yoga class, many times very disturbed or very tired, and then after 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, how do you finish the class? You can see what changed. Yeah, okay, the body changed, okay, the prana, the energy changed, but eventually it was the change of the mind. The mind became more stable, the mind became more clear. Or if it was tired, it became more awake. So we can see how the practice of yoga, practicing with the body and the breath, how it transformed the mind. And today in the West, one of our mistakes is that we took yoga, the practice of Hatha Yoga, the movements and the breathing, as a form of physical exercise to make the body more flexible and strong and to make the energy better. Of course, it influences in this way also, but eventually the purpose was to work with the mind, to change the quality of the mind, to make the mind more sattvic. Another good example why we start with working with body and breath before we start to use the mind directly, we can think of the mind as a wild horse. And imagine you have received a wild horse and now you want to ride it. Are you going to get on the horse immediately? No. If you try to go on the horse immediately, you're going to be injured because it's going to to go crazy. So what we're going to do first with the horse is we're going to put it inside the fence, in some limited area, and first we're going to harness it, put something on it, like a chain or whatever you put on the horse, and we're going to start to lead it, not sitting on it, but just from afar a little bit, but still we are leading it. We are already starting to develop this relationship with the horse. So using the body and the breath is like leading the mind with the leash, not immediately riding it. But by doing this, working with the horse or working the mind with the leash, slowly the horse relaxes. The horse understands your authority over him, and eventually you will be able to ride the horse. So, by working with the body, by working with the breath, the mind relaxes. It starts to understand our authority, and then slowly it will become more calm until we can work directly with the mind. Is this clear? An idea? Any questions? Okay. Now working directly with the mind. This is Hatha Yoga. Working directly with the mind is already, we go to what is called Raja Yoga. It's the next step. We can say here the main technique is asana and pranayama, which is working with the body and working with the breath. And Raja Yoga, the basic technique is meditation. In Sanskrit it is called the Hagana. Here we don't use the body anymore. We just put the body in a posture that will be comfortable and steady for not to disturb our work with the mind. And we don't do any special breathing techniques. We only let the breath to be gentle and free for not to disturb the work of the mind. And then all our practice in Raja Yoga is the practice of the mind. It is to start to sit on the horse and start to direct it using the, how you call it? The reins. Yes, using the reins. So in meditation what we do, we start to direct the mind towards one object. And then, just like a horse, I direct it towards one goal, one path, one direction. Is the horse going to continue only one direction? No. Like a horse, the horse, he sees the grass there, he wants to go there. He sees flowers there, he wants to go there. And me riding on the horse, I will all the time have to manage. Bring it back, direct it again and again to the direction I want to go. This is what we do in meditation, the first step. We start to direct the mind to where we want to go. And this process makes the mind stable because it starts to concentrate. It starts, before it was all over the place, moving different ideas. Every sound was distracting it. Everything was all over the place. And of course, with a mind like this, we cannot investigate. The moment I start to direct it into one object, towards one object, I start to calm the mind, I start to pacify the mind, and I start to make the mind more and more sattvic and more under my control. Why do I need the mind sattvic and under my control? So I can investigate. I can use it to start to see to distinguish between the two things, between what is changing and what is stable. Okay? So this is Raja Yoga. Main technique is the Hagana meditation, one-pointed concentration. But the journey doesn't stop here. Or if we go back to this journey of Apavarga, I can say the first step is the Hatha Yoga. But here, it doesn't have to be only the techniques of asana and pranayama. Everything, any action that makes the mind more calm can be considered as a part of this Apavarga way. So going to nature, for example, if pacifies your mind, it's a good thing. Coming to a seminar, I don't know, even reading something that is inspiring, or writing, or drawing, or listening to music, things that pacify the mind, can be considered here first step into controlling the mind. But then we have to go to the Raja Yoga. We have to work directly with the mind. Only going to nature and feel wonderful in nature will not take us the way we want. Because in this process, eventually, we will have to be able to sit in front of two things and say they are different from each other. And this I don't do when I'm in nature, because in nature I can look at the clouds, I can look at the grass, but I need to look at something very specific. I need to look at the Prakriti and Purusha. I need to look at these two elements. I need to see them. So I can just going to nature or just listening to music and relaxing is not enough. I need to be able to control the mind directly using the techniques of meditation, of dharana, and today we're in the next session we are going to practice it. Okay, so if we have achieved a stable mind, clear mind, a mind that we can easily direct towards the object that we want to investigate, what will be the next step? The investigation. Starting to see what there is and starting to distinguish between two things. This is another form of meditation. And it is already called Jnana Yoga. And here we do what I call analytical meditation. We start to investigate. We start to distinguish between two things. Or if you want words in Sanskrit from Patanjali, we will call it samyama. We are now using the power of the mind to get the knowledge that we want. Now we have a well-working mind and we can use it. And just for those of you who are studying text in yoga, for example, the Yoga Sutra, it shows very nicely the process of Raja Yoga. It explains very nicely how to develop this sattvic mind, well-controlled mind and clear mind. And then it says, when you already have this ability to control the mind, and when the mind in a state, it's called a state of samadhi, a mind that can show you the things as they are, now start to do samyama, start to use the mind to investigate into the nature of the things you want to learn. And it is very nice in this text, Yoga Sutra. In the beginning it gives a lot of different things that you can explore or you can investigate when you have a clear mind, when you have a mind in a samadhi mind, a mind that you can use for investigation and to get right knowledge. So it will say you can investigate the movement of the stars, of the mind or other people, or the languages and things like this. It gives a lot of different examples of what you can learn when you have such a good mind. But eventually it says, to do the way to Kaivalya, the way to freedom, what you have to investigate is the difference between the Purusha and Prakriti. And only if you investigate, use the mind to investigate into the difference between these two, then you will reach Kaivalya. And if you have got this knowledge about the difference between Purusha and Prakriti, this is the end of knowledge concerning the way to Kaivalya. It's like that. So this is the Jnana Yoga. But only having the knowledge as knowledge in this process of apavarga, it was Jnana, Only to have the knowledge as knowledge is not enough. We saw that to take the way, what must we do? Action. Very good. So here comes the point where yoga is no longer a practice on the mat, but it is a practice in life. It is where we start to change our actions and we start to act in a aware way. We now know the difference between the two, but now we must start to act different in life. We cannot continue. We cannot continue doing actions based on the kleshas, based on desire and aversion. We must start to act from a different place, from a conscious place in life. We must understand. We already understand the difference between us and the body and the mind, and we have to act like it. A simple example how it will look like. Imagine you wake up in the morning. And many times when we wake up in the morning, we have this thing of, another day, what's the point of getting up? I want to stay in bed. You know this feeling? Or it's only me? Okay. So, sometimes it's like this. Now, if I work according to the kleshas, I woke up with this horrible feeling, no point in getting out of bed. What is going to, and I work, and I let the kleshas direct my action. What is going to be my action? Very good. I'm going to stay in bed. Okay? Because what's the point to get out? But if I have done the process of apavarga, and I got the knowledge that I am different than the mind, I am different than the thoughts, I am different than the feelings, they don't bind me, they don't restrict me, they are not my prison. Yes, I am free, although they are there, and I act in a conscious way. What will be my action? To get up and for example, and do my practice, and drink my coffee, and prepare for the day, and do my duties. And then my life will take completely different direction. When I stay in bed, it is one direction, towards samsara. But when I can take myself out of bed, although my mind is screaming, stay in bed, this is freedom. Can you see it? This is a moment of freedom, and like this is the kaivalya. Every moment I have chosen to act in a aware way, I am taking a step of kaivalya, taking a step of freedom. And it is very interesting to notice. Our life is the results of our actions. Our life is not the results of what we think and what we feel, although this is what we are used to think. I will give you an easy example. The fact that we are all here, this is now our life. Okay? What decided our life that we are here? Only the fact that all of us did actions to take us here. We took the plane, we took the ferry, we drove, doesn't matter, and we came here. How many of us thought, should we come, should we not come? I want to come, I don't want to come. Did we? We had probably these thoughts. Should I come, should I not come? I want to come, I don't want to come. Where are all these thoughts now? What power do they have over your life? Zero. They didn't decide if you are here now, that you are here now. It was your actions, the actions that we all took that decided that our life, not what we thought. But we are so used to think that our life is what we think and what we feel, and we can see that also when people ask us about our life, we immediately start to describe what we feel and what we think. But this has nothing to do with our life. But the only thing that says something about our life is our actions. And they will decide our life. So the moment I can choose consciously my actions, doesn't matter how much my mind screams and cries and tell me negative things and tell me, I don't know, stories and all of this, and we know what the mind is capable of. If I have acted in a useful way, I will get the result of this. My life will go this way. So, every time we act in freedom, every time we act in a conscious way, we act in freedom, and every time we do this, we choose our life. We choose the result. We choose the action and we will get the result. And this is part of our freedom in this life, to be able to choose our actions to get the results that we want. And we see the people that they cannot choose their actions, they have a lot of dreams. You know them? They have many plans, lot of things they want to do, but they are not able to act, because the minute they start to even to think about acting, immediately the mind says, oh, I cannot handle it, it's too difficult, we're not good enough, blah, blah, blah. Nothing happens in their life. And they have a lot of dreams, but nothing really happens. But the people that can do, you can see their life grow and you can see the freedom that is there. So, in this process, we have the Karma Yoga. Karma is action. And this is in the daily life, to start to choose your action consciously. Doesn't matter what the mind says. Choose according to what is useful. If you want to do the project, do the project. During this project, you're going to feel many things. You're going to feel that it's too much, that it's boring, that you're not good enough. What will people say? What if you fail? You will have many, and also you will be very energized, and you will be excited and enthusiastic. You will have many, many different ideas and emotions and feelings about this project. But none of them is going to make your project happen. Don't depend on them. If you want the project to happen, you have to act, do the emails you need to do, the phone calls you need to do, the actions that are involved, and only then you will see the project happening. One of the biggest problems in the West, why people are dreaming a lot but not doing a lot, is because they are used to decide their actions according to what they feel. And what do you know about our feelings? They are changing all the time. So they only do when they feel like doing, and they stop doing when they don't feel like doing. And then nothing is gets done. A very simple example is, think of your garden. If you want your garden to flourish, you have to take care of it every day. Yeah? Even if you like it or not. But imagine how your garden will look like if you only take care of it when you feel like it. And then when there are periods that you don't feel like it, you don't take care of it. What is going to happen to your garden? Nothing. It's not going to flourish. So the same thing goes with your life, with our life. If you decide your actions according if you feel like it or don't feel like it, you will see nothing much happening. But if you will be able to act freely, from a conscious way, free from the mind, using the mind to act, but free from the wants and the not wants of the mind, the liking and the not liking of the mind, if you will be able to act freely, free from that, and according to what you want, you will see your life going exactly in the direction that you want. And many people, the problem is that they always act according to what they feel, and it changes all the time, and then the actions are not steady, and they get nowhere. Can you see it in their life? And I know many people like it. It's so funny. Yeah. Questions? Okay. So, where are we? So Karma Yoga is action in life. This is exactly the point in the text called Bhagavad Gita. When Arjuna, one guy, asks, what is more important, knowledge or action? Because he's here in the middle. And he tells us, the knowledge is important because it tells us how to act. But without the action itself, nothing will happen, so you must act in the life. You cannot avoid action. Our life, the life of Prakriti, remember the word Prakriti is movement, is action. And things in Prakriti always needs to be taken care of. The body because it is changing all the time, because it is temporary, it needs constant caring. The mind needs constant caring. The food needs to be prepared. The life of Prakriti is life of action. So as long as we have a human form, we have to be involved in action. But this doesn't take our freedom away if we act in a conscious way. Action binds us only when it is done according to the kleshas. And then we are all the time trying to satisfy the mind, and we can never do it. But if we are not trying to satisfy the mind, but if we are working according to what is necessary, then we will see the freedom that we have in action. Do you understand the idea?
And so we need this Rajas energy to do the action and then come back again. And we need the Tamas energy to sleep well, to have the power to act, and then come back to the Sattva again. So the goal is not to stay in this static mind, to float freely in and out of this.
Yeah, this is one of the characteristics of this life, that is always moving between the Tamas state, the heavy state, and the movement, and the Sattvic state. But when for what we needed the Sattva, we needed it for the investigation. So for this, we really need it. And after that, we can flow. But first, to get the knowledge, we need some certain amount of steady Sattva in the mind to be able to investigate into the nature of things. All right? Okay. So, we have started to act in life. We are nearing Kaivalya. Now our actions are free. They are no longer binding us, and they are useful actions. They sustain the body, they sustain the mind, they sustain our relationships with ourselves, with other people, with the environment. We start to be useful in all our actions. As a result, and we become more and more aware. Because we act from a conscious place, what now is changing is our identification. We start to identify less and less with the mind, because it no longer governs our actions. And what governs our actions is the consciousness. So we become more and more identified with the conscious element in us, until we realize that we are this unchanging conscious, not only realizing it through the knowledge, through the investigation of knowing that there are two different things, but now the realization is from experience. It's like our identification changes. Until now we have been identifying ourselves with this human system, with the mind and the body, and now we will start to identify ourselves with the conscious element. And the moment we start to identify ourselves with this unchanging thing, something very deep changes in the relationship with life. Until now, we have always tried to gain something by our actions. Even in this karma yoga, we try to gain something. We try to gain more knowledge. We try to gain freedom. We try to gain to become more and more aware. In all this process, there was also always something we tried to gain. But when we understand that we are Purusha, and Purusha cannot change, Purusha cannot gain, Purusha cannot lose. Gaining and losing only belongs to Prakriti. Now we understand we cannot get anything from any of our actions. Yeah? We are not the one that gain, we are not the one that lose. Our whole relationship with life changed. We stop looking for something in this life. So we become free from the life completely. Until now, there was still something we tried to gain. Knowledge, consciousness, something. But now that we have understood our nature, we understand there is nothing more to gain. Nothing more we need from life. And then we become completely separated from life, but we are still living. And then our actions in life will be only actions of serving. Because we have no any intention of earning anything, because we know we cannot, we are not the one that earn, like we are not the one that loses. Then in our actions there is no more this idea of earning something. The only thing that will direct our actions now will be to serve, to fulfill the purpose of the city. What was the purpose of the city? Do you remember? What is the purpose of a city?
Maintain us.
To give us a house, but to serve us. Okay? This is why there is a city. So we start to use our human form to serve life, not nothing else. Until now we have been, before that we've been a little bit still selfish. We were trying to gain something for ourselves. Even if it was knowledge, it was for us. Even if it was freedom, it was for us. But now that we know who we are and that we cannot win, we cannot gain and we cannot lose, and we are completely free all the time anyway, but we are still alive, we understand that this city is still alive, we start to just to be in service, just to use this city to serve life, to be part of life. And this is what is called Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti is like surrendering. What do we surrender to? We surrender to our purpose. And we understand that this life that we have is here only to serve. There is no other purpose. And this is what we start to do. We have no selfish idea or something we want to gain from life anymore, and then only then we are completely free from life. Because as long as we want something from life, in which path are we? We are still in the samsara because we want something from the life. We are still based in a little bit in the clashes because we want something. But the moment we understand that we cannot gain and we cannot lose, then we need nothing anymore from life. And then we are completely separated from life. And then comes what the yoga calls Paravairagya. It is like the complete release, the complete letting go, because I don't need anything more from life. Still life is there. Still, this body is alive, this mind is alive. I use them and I maintain them and I do everything to serve. But there is no anymore this selfish connection, this trying to gain something. And then, according to the Sankhya philosophy and yoga, then all this city that was here, because I am now using my life only to serve the purpose, after serving the purpose will stop to exist and there will be no need for another one. A simple example, when we are hungry, what is the purpose of hunger? No, the hunger to make us eat. Yeah? What happens to the hunger after we ate? The hunger disappears. There is no longer need for it. So the same goes here. After I have fulfilled the purpose of this city, of this life, I have realized my nature, I've gained the freedom, then there is no longer need for another journey. And then, only then we are free, because we have fulfilled the purpose. We are free from the samsara, we are free from another birth, and then we have reached the total kaivalya. We have become completely detached from everything, completely pure. But yoga says if we haven't yet completed the journey, and for example our city died, the body died, then we will get another one and another one and another one. But only after we have completed the journey, we have completed the purpose, then we will no longer go towards samsara, and we will reach the complete kaivalya, and that is the happy end. Only there is nothing there. And then, yeah, this is for now. Any questions? So, what we still have later on, we are going to practice to have some techniques how to do this way towards kaivalya, and we still have to discuss a little bit more later on how life in kaivalya looks like, and what do we do there. All right? Good. So break. Enjoy.